I don't know about you, but Melissa and I have had some discussions lately. They are animated discussions. Some may even call them fights. It's been hard to be on shutdown. A lot of our normal routines and rhythms of the day have changed or been altered. There hasn't been even the separation that allows for you to be fond and miss each other when you come back during the day, because most of us are stay at home all the time right now, with the kids, with work, all digital. It's been a difficult time for marriages. Just a couple weeks ago, I got call after email after text about marriages that were struggling, that whether it was one spouse or both of them that were just struggling with the personal issues, and therefore it comes into that conflict, that animated discussion when couples come back together. This is a challenging time. I even heard from one friend who was finalizing a divorce from a few years ago, and the divorce attorney shared with him that it was 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010, during the last financial crisis, that he had the most business when the most people were filing for divorce, and he anticipated that this coronavirus with the recession would lead to the same. You see, difficult times make it difficult for marriages too. But what I'm going to encourage you today to live in hope in your life and in your marriage and in the marriages of people around you, because if you're single, it's still important to think about the relationships around you. What I want to encourage you today is that no matter what, marriage matters. No matter what, your marriage matters. No matter what. Because Peter was writing in difficult circumstances in the first century. There was persecution, there was poverty, there were people and families being forced apart. And in the isolation that happened, like we talked about with the scattering of Christians during that time period, Peter still wrote a section of his letter to inform them how to better and improve their marriages. No matter what, your marriage matters. So I want to encourage you to focus on your marriage during this time. Don't let things get worse and even worse, and the worst things come out of you as an individual and just kind of get thrown up on the other person verbally or emotionally. But I want us to take time to focus on our marriage during the pandemic. So there's one thing I want to encourage wives to do who are watching this video, and there's one thing I want to encourage husbands to do. So if you're the spouse who's watching it and you don't think your spouse is watching, I want you to tag them on Facebook or send them an email with this, write their name in a comment section and just say, hey, you've got to watch this, because I have something from Peter for both of you. And the first message from Peter comes from him to wives. And Peter was a married man, unlike Paul, who wrote a lot of the New Testament. But Peter was married. Paul even talked about how Peter would bring his wife along with him. And Peter, as a married man, writes first to wives and then to husbands. The word that Peter gives to wives first is to do right, and God will make it right. To do right, and God will make it right. Let me read this section of 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 1 through 6. Peter writes, "Wives, in the same way submit yourselves to your own husbands, so that if any of them do not believe the word, they may be won over without words by the behavior of their wives." So he's saying, hey, I know some of you have husbands that are not great, including some that are not even Christians, but still you need to submit to them and to love them and respect them. He goes on, "When they see the purity and reverence of your lives, your beauty should not come from outward adornment, such as elaborate hairstyles and the wearing of gold, jewelry, or fine clothes. Rather, it should be that of your inner self, the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is of great worth in God's sight." He's saying, your husbands, yeah, they are attracted to physical beauty. Men are visual creatures, and yet, he says, what's on the inside is more important. And you need to do good from the inside. He goes on. Verse 5, "For this is the way the holy women of the past who put their hope in God used to adorn themselves." See there, when you live in hope, it changes your actions even in your marriage. "They submitted themselves to their own husbands." Verse 6, "Like Sarah, who obeyed Abraham and called him her Lord. You are her daughters if you do what is right and do not give way to fear." He ends there by saying, do what's right, do good for your husbands. And I find it really interesting, his phrase there, "and do not give way to fear." I really had to wrestle with that idea. What does that mean? Why is that in there? Well, when I've spoken with wives, especially those that have unbelieving husbands or husbands who are being sinful or angry or struggling with an issue, what they struggle with is the fear that if they're good and nice to their husbands, that it's almost going to say that their bad behavior is okay. that they're almost saying it's not that big of a deal, as if they're the one that has to be the boss and only give rewards if the husband does good things. Now, you should reward your husband if he does something good. But what Peter is saying to you is that don't be afraid. Don't be afraid that your husband is going to use your goodness as a license for his badness. No, you're supposed to do good. You're supposed to do right and trust God to make it right. Do right and trust God to make it right. So I want to encourage you. That's my word to you wives today through Peter. Now to husbands, listen up. Listen up. This is what Peter writes to husbands in verse 7. Husbands, in the same way, be considerate as you live with your wives, and treat them with respect as the weaker partner and as heirs with you of the gracious gift of life, so that nothing will hinder your prayers. So he says that your wives are weaker. Now, this is a physical weakness. In 9 plus out of 10 relationships, the husband is a stronger vessel, body, than the female. But he says, yes, they are physically weaker, but then he says heirs with you, meaning they may be physically different than you, but they are equal before God. They're equal before God. Men and women are equal in God's eyes. There's an equality there, even though there are some differences in the biological makeup of a husband and a wife, of a man and a woman. But what Peter is saying here to husbands in particular, he says, be considerate. Now, that's such a basic thing, and yet we husbands need to be reminded of it. He's saying, consider them. Think about your wives. Think about them, because all you think about is yourself. Yeah, you selfish husband, you're listening to this right now. I'm talking with you. I'm talking to me. Think about your wife. It's important, and he even ties this to your relationship with God, and he basically says to husbands that if you think about your wives, your God will think about you. If you think about your wives, your God will think about you. Okay? God is saying, I won't answer your prayers unless you're showing respect and love and consideration to your wives. So husbands, think about your wives. Now, I want you to take time to do this. This is difficult in the coronavirus. It used to be that I'd encourage husbands to think about your wives on your drive home. Use the time to unwind and think and pray so that when you get home, you can do something to help your wife. Now, that's difficult if you're working from home and the kids are around all the time. So I want to encourage you, think about your wives. At the end of your workday, take 5 minutes, end a little early, and just say, I'm going to take 5 minutes to think about my wife and think about how I could help her, serve her, love her, make her life better today. Not tomorrow, not next week, not Valentine's Day, not Mother's Day, not when our anniversary comes up. Oh yeah, next year's 10, I'll do something big then. No. Today. Think about your wife today. And if you don't know how you can help her today, ask her, okay? We are idiot men. We need to ask our wives. We need to figure out what they want and do it. So think about your wives, and your God will think about you. Okay, I hope this helps you, because I know this is a difficult time, but we still need to focus on our marriages in this time, because no matter what, your marriage matters.